Today, it's my pleasure to not only welcome a wonderful guy, but a top experienced coach in Fritz Schmid. I worked with Fritz in New Zealand football, where he was the head coach of the men's national team, the All Whites. Fritz has been a professional coach for over 30 years, working throughout Europe, New Zealand, and now in Africa. His CV is impressive, with roles at clubs such as FC Zurich and Grasshoppers in his native Switzerland, Tottenham Hotspurs in the English Premier League, FC Basel in the UEFA Champions League, and Kokoto Royals in the Ghana Premier League. He's also held roles within the Austrian men's national team as an assistant coach, as well as being the Malaysian technical director. Fritz holds the highest coaching qualification in football, the UEFA Pro Licence, and is also working as a consultant for the Africa Football Association. He's a man with a fascinating journey and lots of experiences to draw upon. Okay, let's go.
Fritz, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Gareth. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Great to see you as well. It was a couple of weeks ago. I had this fantastic like on one of my posts that I've been busily doing in the last 6 months, and it was from Fritz. I was like, oh, this is wonderful. I haven't seen or heard from you for a while. So just to paint the picture, we worked together, albeit briefly, at New Zealand football, a number of years ago now. And one of the key stories that I still remember quite clearly today and refer back to quite often is sort of near the end of your time at New Zealand football. You came into the office, or my office, and we were having a chat. And before you left me with some words of wisdom. You said, Gareth, you need to know what your self-worth is. And if the self-worth is not being met, it's time to go. And then with that, you stood up and you shook my hand and said goodbye. And then a couple of weeks later, you moved away from New Zealand football. So I thank you for that wisdom. It's something I hold quite dear to me, and think about often.
That's nice to hear. That's a good story to start our interview, Gareth. Yeah, I remember that, and I remember that sharing with you as one of the few individuals in my environment at that time. And without getting into any stories or any experiences with during my time in New Zealand, I think you can first of all refer to the fact that I wasn't really used to a full extent, because maybe you remember the All Whites at that time, they didn't really have too many games on their calendar. So I would actually sit around, assess maybe players, scout players. I at that time I had offered to New Zealand football that they can use me as whatever, as a tutor, as a coach educator in their coaching courses, or to develop any other programs, which obviously wasn't really needed. So I had to come to the conclusion that I spent a lot of time without really, being on the pitch, being, engaged in working with players, coaching sessions or games. So I had to say it's nice to be there. It's also nice to be the national coach of a country like New Zealand, but there wasn't obviously not enough work around. So I thought, maybe you just move on and get yourself a job where you're really on a daily basis involved, whatever it might be.
And I know that you've been incredibly busy since 2019, when you moved on. So yeah, for the people certainly back in New Zealand listening in, I'm sure there's a lot of intrigued people. Like, fill us in on the journey over the last 4 years.
Well, when you, like, maybe you're aware that I have actually traveled almost the whole globe with many of my coaching jobs. So after leaving New Zealand, I thought for a while it was time to get back to Switzerland to touch base at home. I got involved with smaller mandates, consulting mandates with UEFA and with FIFA. unfortunately, we had the pandemic coming and changing, bringing a lot of changes also in terms of developing activities with federations, with MAs, with clubs. So I was, for a certain while, I was involved as a mentor, as a consultant with UEFA programs and FIFA programs to help MAs and sometimes clubs to get through these difficult times during the pandemic. And after we could go back to let's say normal activities, there would be more consulting and mentoring activities. I was a mentor for technical directors of certain countries, from Vietnam to Mexico, and in Africa, Mozambique, where you actually follow the technical director of a federation to help him to get into his job. I'm also part of an advisory group from UEFA, where we have now, over the last few years, developed new coaching courses for fitness diplomas, to actually to align certain aspects of fitness coaching in football, as you know, which is a very difficult task. You find so many, different philosophies and approaches. So it's from UEFA view, it was an important task, an important step to offer some key criteria, which would be, binding and aligning certain aspects of fitness education in all the countries. And we have now introduced these diplomas to all the member associations. We're running pilot courses where you actually guide and support the various associations in their task to really run these courses. And I've been back to the pitch recently with a nice adventure in Ghana, because I've also mentored and been a consultant for Ghana football associations. And out of these contacts, there was a situation where I would step in as a head coach for a team in the Ghana second tier, second division, where I actually had, initially tried to help them to find a good coach for the season, with the ambition to go to the Premier League. But that didn't really work out. So they were desperate to find new coaches. They wouldn't find coaches. So at the end of the day, I just stepped in and decided to help them and finish the whole season, to bring them to the Ghana Premier League. So that was an exciting adventure, but of course with very, particular, unique conditions in the environment.
Yeah, so I think you've been pretty modest and kind of glossed over just to confirm, you did get promotion to the Premier League. Well done, congratulations. That was
actually, yeah. Thank you, Gareth. That's very kind of you. I have to say, I was bold enough to think, let me go down there and show them how it's done. But it was a tough one, and you always need to be a bit lucky to at the end to be on top of it. But thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate it.
It's important. It's important for context. Now, like we heard it through the bio, you've had a lot of experience coaching, both in head coaching positions as well as assistant coaching positions. Now, I'm currently operating as an assistant coach, so I can kind of glean a little bit of experience, but nowhere near to your level. So I quite often get asked the question, what are the key differences between the two roles, and are they actually different? Keen to hear your take on that. Is one better than the other? Are they different? Do they suit different personalities or skill sets better? Are they quite interchangeable? How would you approach that idea of being a head coach versus an assistant coach?
I think that's a good point which you just mentioned. Of course, you can ask yourself, is it a different, skill set? Does it suit certain personalities better to be a head coach or to be an assistant coach? I think, and like you say, I've been in both roles. I think the key is understanding your profile and your responsibilities. I mean, that's easier to explain and to be said when you're in the role of the head coach, because then you have to really manage and be on top of all the aspects which concern the development, the work with your team, with your club, or with your association if you're a national coach. And of course, you also have to manage your staff, not only the players, which means it's about relationships. It's about, relegating, delegating, deciding who to take which role in the whole setup. And you're on top of it. You're out there. You're exposed. You're the one who is being, either praised or criticized for results, for performance. And you also have to face the public, the sponsors, the media, the fans. You're really, at the front of it. And as an assistant coach, as you might experience now, you're a bit in the background. You're out of the focus sometimes, which is, of course, a nice thing. The biggest challenge for, in the role of an assistant coach or any role in a staff is to understand, first of all, your role and your place, and to understand that you are actually in the service of a complete, overall project, and that you're not the one who makes the decisions, the one to make calls. You're actually, providing supportive work, whatever that is, to a bigger context. And it's, I think, I don't know how you see it, but I think of all the roles, nowadays you have big staff, you have fitness coaches, you have a video specialist, you have performance nutritionists, everything. And in a way, the role of the assistant coach is the one which is least, defined. It's very open what you deliver and where you really make yourself useful. And it's a very important role to be very close with the head coach, to give you responsibilities for certain areas where you have maybe a lot of, room for you really to bring in your knowledge, your experience. And this is something which depends on the relationship and the trust and the confidence you bring in and you develop with the coach.
Yeah, I think that's something that needs to be developed over time, obviously. So I can't remember who said it, but something that I think of sometimes as well is, as an assistant coach, when you lose, you walk side by side with the head coach, and when you win, you walk 3 meters behind the head coach, because it's not about you. You're in service to the head coach as much as the program, and the head coach goes through a lot of those other duties that as an assistant coach you kind of get more freedom to express your qualities on the training field, and without the responsibilities of the media and the sponsors and stuff. So that's great. You've also, spent a lot of, probably split your time between international coaching. So firstly with the Swiss FA, Switzerland, as well as New Zealand football, and professional club environments, club leagues around the world. So, how do you see the main differences or similarities, I guess, between international coaching and professional club coaching, either as a head or as an assistant coach?
Well, in professional coaching, club coaching, it's obviously, because it's on a daily basis, you really work with, to develop players, develop teams. You have a project, you have maybe some aspects where you want to implement some key aspects representing the club's philosophy. You're in a project where really drive to for progress on a daily basis, the exchange, the contact with the players on a daily basis. You also have your performance evaluated on a regular basis, because every week you get the result from a game, and you have, you can take it from there, and the next day you step back on the pitch and you work on whatever has been, good or maybe not so good over the last few weeks or days in your performance. And that's, of course, is exciting, is intense, and is really, working directly with your players, with your staff, on a regular basis. And with as a national coach, as a head coach of an international, team, it's more about management of relationships, getting an overview on what you might have to do when you get them on the pitch for a certain window where you play international games, because you have the team, you have the players, even sometimes your staff, they are available on a very short time basis, which means you have to scout, you have to stay in contact between international windows, you have to make sure that you still can develop relationships, you can create, some contacts, and develop certain aspects which might help you in this short time when you work with the national team to find a common ground and a certain, philosophy, work ethics, and ambition to really perform. It's 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks. They come in on Monday, they have to rest from the weekend's game. They have to tell you, boss, I'm not used to do so many sprints in my club. Can I stop here? And all these aspects. And of course, you're also responsible not only to bring in the players for your performance, for your games, you're also responsible for taking the players back, to have to be in contact with all the clubs. So it's a lot of relationship, it's a lot of management of all these different aspects.
Very, very different type of coaching. You speak about intensity in the professional club leagues. I'd say it's equally as intense for those 2 weeks that you're away. I think there's a lot of transferable skill sets of coaching and management and leading others and connecting with an organization, and then obviously as a national team coach you're still connecting with professional clubs. Communication, it's one and the same. The day-to-day does differ and the week-to-week does differ, but there's a lot of more similarities than probably what I anticipated coming here to Melbourne Victory. I thought it'd be quite different. Now experiencing both for a good number of years for both, I think it's not as polar opposite as maybe what I first thought when I first came here. What do you enjoy most? Well, if you could pick a role with the national team.
That's interesting. I think I'm happy for you to ask this, because now when you mentioned that, of course there is a lot of similarities. Even as a club coach, you have to also relate and manage your contacts with all the stakeholders, not only with your team on the pitch. You have to stay connected to clubs, to other club coaches, to the what I like most in coaching a club team is, after the game and analyzing the game, you can step back on the pitch. And I remember with the New Zealand All Whites, we would travel, unfortunately not as many times as I was actually hoping for, but we would travel, play a tournament in India. After the last game, you would have to give them some feedback on the performance, and you'd have to let them go. And like I mentioned, if you don't have regular camps or opportunities to bring them back, you have to let them go back to their clubs, and you can't pick it up immediately and work on whatever you would like to work with them on a regular basis. That's if you like this work on the pitch, if you like this work with the player, that's sometimes something which you have to get used to. And let me share a personal experience. As you know, I'm not the youngest colleague anymore. I mean, coaches, they come in, you know, from education, 40, 45. That's where they usually think they're in the peak of their, you know, their career. And I had a moment where I thought, yeah, maybe, you know, it's a bit more relaxed to be a national coach, because you have windows. Between the windows, you may be scouting, you may be traveling and watching games. But then I went back to Ghana and worked with the club team on a daily basis. And I have to say that's the best thing you can do, because you're really around the team 24/7. And you go back from a session and you analyze already your session for the next day. And I think that's what makes it exciting, and what makes it really interesting. And of course, again, it's every weekend. Every weekend you see development, you see progress, you see new challenges, and you go back the following day and you pick it up from there. That's the exciting about being a coach.
Yeah, I can see it on your face as well, Fritz. Obviously, Ghana would have been an incredible challenge as well as an experience. What about some of maybe the resource limitations? I'm making an assumption that's more limitations than a plethora of resources. So, I guess some advice maybe for coaches who, you know, before they get into a role where resources might be a challenge. You know, how did you adapt to some of those resource challenges from your time at Ghana?
Gareth, I'm afraid you don't have time enough on your podcast to really get into this. What I might say, and this is something which, you know, any colleague who is considering, you know, traveling, going abroad, picking up a coaching job, you have to be prepared for a few things which when you come from a certain environment, I mean, look, in any situation, a coach, you have certain constraints, you have certain limitations, resources. Maybe you don't have enough financial resources. Maybe you don't have facilities, pitches. That's the same all over. You have to be prepared to different lifestyle. And I mean, just to explain that, initially, this situation in Ghana was that the club had approached me to help them find a coach. And I was involved in the interview process. I was involved in giving them advice who might be the right man for them. And the right man left after a few weeks or a few months, because he couldn't bear, you know, the conditions around the whole situation. I mean, there was out in the jungle, 4 or 5 hours away from they call it bush in Ghana, bush, and about from Accra, the capital. And sometimes you wouldn't have electricity, you wouldn't have water. It's not like you can go to the movies or buy something at McDonald's. And the facilities and the infrastructure where you have to really try to make something out of your job is of course not of the same quality. So you have to deal with a lot of, you know, constraints, and you have to go with it, because once you accept that you're in an environment where you don't, you know, have the same luxury, you know, situation where you come from, maybe, it's down to the work with the team. It's down to the work with the players. And if you can really live with it, if you can accept that, it's normal coaching. You also have to be aware that you will always be the stranger, the foreigner, the farang. In Asia, they call you farang, and you can be as successful as you want. After 1 or 2 wrong decisions, they will see you as, you know, the outsider who comes in to try to explain the game. But they know about the game. They think, why do we need, you know, someone from outside? And I think that's something, you know, coaches have to be prepared for. They come into a new environment, they have to study the culture, and they have to adapt to the culture of their new environment. Very often young coaches, they want to get somewhere and they want to implement their ideas or their philosophies. And actually, it's the other way around. You have to adapt. It's not the new environment where they have to adapt to your expectations or to your philosophy. That's maybe one of the key aspects.
Some great wisdom there around adapting to the environment you're in, knowing or researching it before you go into it, experiencing different cultures and countries and leagues and different types of head coach or assistant coach, international football, club football. You've had 35 years of being a professional coach. You hold a UEFA Pro license. You've worked in some of the best leagues in the world. I guess, is there any other one or two things that you would, ensure if you were mentoring, say, me, who's a coach who's working their way towards that high performance level? So, you do mentor people as well. So what is some of the advice that you give to coaches who are trying to, to get their first job in a high performance environment? Now, it doesn't have to be football. It's obviously a lot of coaching across sports is the same set of skills, and it's just sport or code specific will change. But, other than the things you've already touched on, is there anything else that you think is really important for us to be aware of?
Well, the first thing I'd say, if you have any opportunity to step in somewhere, you have to take it. You have to take it, and you have to be prepared for, the challenge, and you have to take that step. What's maybe an important observation, and that's also coming from my observations in coach education. When I work in coach education courses, what I realize is that young coaches, if they take their license, the first thing they're aiming at is getting to the top as soon as possible, right? I mean, to be honest, when I had my first title, I won with the Grasshoppers under 20, a league in the elite youth league in Switzerland. And next day we're reading the newspaper, and there is just a two-liner, explaining that some team from Grasshoppers has won some league. And I remember telling my wife that one day I would want to have that. If I win anything, I want to have it on the front page. So that's the mentality or the ambition of young coaches. They think they want to go to the top as quickly as possible. And I think you have to be a bit more patient, a bit more relaxed in this aspect, because any step which takes you maybe in this direction, any step, even if it's maybe on a lower level, or as you have now explained from your experience being involved in youth development, any step will give you more experience, more insights in all the facets of this job. And I tell you, once you step to the professional level, again, as a head coach particularly, you'll be out there in a very tough environment. And you have to understand that you might not get too many shots on the top level. I usually use a lot of statistics to explain how many coaches, if they take the English Premier League, how many coaches get to the Premier League and they take a team on the top. If you don't succeed with your first job, the chance, the possibilities that you come back, they are not always too high. So you have to be aware that once you step out in this, to this competition on this level, you have to deliver. You will be exposed to a lot of stress, and that it might be a short adventure. So that's why I'm saying, allow yourself to take the time to make steps, to get a lot of experience on all the levels, because you might find that you're more suited to a role, like we mentioned, maybe as an assistant coach, maybe as a talent developer, and still making great experience and have great adventures. And also you have to go abroad. You have to be prepared to travel. because you would experience that they play very competitive football in many countries, not only like in the English Premier League or in the Australian top league. It's really football. It can take you anywhere.
Yeah, well, I think sport can take you everywhere, and you know, if we've both been fortunate that it has taken us to some great places, and sport, where our context being football, but you know, other codes, there's many roles within an organization off the pitch, but also many roles within a team on the pitch that good people can find their place in the world. Obviously, the top of the pyramid, so to speak, is really challenging to get to, and a lot of the people listening who are coaches will be working at more, you know, grassroots or more sort of pre-performance spaces. So, what about speaking to coaches who are now working with kids, football specific or other? You know, through your wisdom and years of coaching, like, what are some of the key areas or faults that you see across coaches who are working at that, you know, 15 to 19-year-old development stage that you think we can be more aware of?
Maybe there's two things which I have experienced, and that comes from me also being involved in as a coach educator for FIFA, UEFA on the various levels. Take grassroots to begin with. Grassroots, you know, the youngest. Comparing that to the situation of a coach in a professional environment, I used to say that working with kids is the most rewarding work you can do as a football coach, because now we're getting away from, you know, from result oriented, you know, successful or success oriented, you know, pressure game where you have to deliver to stay in the competition, to be really a top coach on the highest level. You have a lot of other aspects where you can actually offer a lot to kids on their way, whether they promote to athletes, to professional athletes, they move to higher levels later, or just to you know, to be involved in sports or in the game. In our situation, that's why I'm saying one of the most rewarding jobs is working with kids and with young players, and you know, taking that to the level of, you know, from under 15 to maybe to under 19, where they hope to be, you know, promoted to move up to maybe professional level. That's where you can actually support any individual, you know, in their ambition to really to make progress and to get to these higher levels. And very often it's not only, you know, about developing a potential pro athlete, it's more helping individuals to grow, you know, personally, and maybe exploit, you know, whatever they have as a potential or as a talent in any sports.
Fascinating. I guess the final, or not the final, I guess the next part of this kind of conversation, you just sort of alluded to there, the development and the trajectory of the athlete. So if you're now speaking to athletes in front of you, rather than, you know, it's changed the focus away from speaking to coaches, you're now speaking to athletes, so football people specifically, but I'm sure a lot of this information would transfer to other individual sports or team sports. What piece of wisdom would you offer up a younger version of maybe yourself, or, you know, players or athletes in that sort of 15 to 19 age bracket who are striving to be professional athletes, striving to play for their national body, striving to get to the Olympic Games? And obviously that we spoke about, it's difficult as a coach to convert to high performance. It's equally as difficult to transfer as a high performance athlete. So obviously different codes will have different challenges, and in different countries also different bars to reach. But yeah, what's the main piece of advice that you've got for athletes who are looking to work towards those higher echelons of their sport?
Look, if you have if you have athletes who have, already entered this trajectory, on the way to maybe getting to professional sports, they usually have the understanding that they have certain qualities, certain talents. And what I like to share always first is very often it's not the talent that takes you to the top. It's the will, or the perseverance, the decision, or the ambition to really work hard. And that's very interesting. When I talk to young players, actually interesting and challenging to convince them that, even the best of the best, gifted players, talented players, if they are not prepared to really work for it, it's going to be difficult. I like to give a lot of examples of really top athletes in world sports. And you would also come back and have to explain how hard they usually had to work to really make it to the top, despite whatever qualities and talents they already had, and how gifted they were. I mean, I was lucky enough as a Swiss, as you know, working with FC Basel. We had Roger Federer sometimes in our coaching sessions, in our sessions with FC Basel, training with the players, because of course he liked, the game. He liked to play, kick the ball. And that's a guy who was always considered to be, so gifted that it looks easy when he played his game and elegantly, won titles after title. And if you look behind the scenes, how hard these guys work and how hard they really, exploit whatever they have as a potential. And that's what I like first, to share with any talent. Look, you might be as talented as whatever, but there's always, sooner or later, you further up you get to the top, there are guys around you with same talent, sometimes maybe with other qualities, and you have to make sure that you can really keep up with these in the competition. And it's without hard work, without doing the extra effort, it will be difficult. It will always be difficult. When you think about, you ask me what would I advise the younger me, I would tell them, get out more often, do more practice, work on certain qualities, because you know what you have, you know what you need. You have a lot of, people around you telling you about your qualities, about your deficiencies. So get out there and work on it. That's what I would tell the younger me.
Yeah, the secret is there's no secret. It's about hard work and continued improvement. I remember something that Lionel Messi spoke about in his book when he was at Barcelona. He said talent got people into the changing room, but character kept them there, or character kicked them out ultimately. And there was a lot of talented players that kind of came in, didn't settle, didn't fit the ethos of the group, and got moved on. And sometimes those maybe not quite as talented, but had the other attributes as an athlete, a rounded athlete. The other ones that stayed, and that team went on to become, probably one of the best teams in our generation, if not across the world. One of the
absolutely. I mean, I was just, because you mentioned, of course, talent and the work is one part, but then you mentioned personality, attitude. That's where I usually like to tell players, you have to behave like a champion before you are a champion. And this obviously includes all these elements which make your character, your personality, your attitude, how you behave on the pitch and off the pitch, with your teammates, with your opponents. It's a long story. It's a big thing, but I think this would be the next key element which young athletes need to understand. It's not only the sports thing. It's the personality. They're working to be a good professional, and a good person. At the end of the day, it's about being a good role model.
So a lot of that growth, that human growth, whether it be personality, character, behaviors, all these things, we as coaches can shape a little bit, but the reality is it falls back on the athlete. But a big support network for the athlete is their parents predominantly. So this is kind of one of the ideas of connecting to people like yourself, is to also connect into the parents into these conversations and offer them some advice, this time from yourself as a coach. So if you were speaking to parents or parents listening in, what's the advice and wisdom that you can share over your fantastic history of what we've spoken about in the past, to help these athletes on their journey transition more successfully than potentially not?
Well, maybe the first one, like you mentioned, it's the first thing to educate or to build the person, to build character, obviously is for the parents. I mean, we not always, but very often you observe that they are just dropped to school. Teachers have to educate them, drop to full sports training, or whatever activities where they have to be educated. But the role of the parents to really build character is, of course, the first responsibility, to be honest. And then it's about being at their side and understanding that you have some important responsibilities as a parent when they are involved in these programs, because most of the time it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of it's not linear, the development of an athlete or the progress into a career is not a linear situation. So you have to be there and be like a supportive act in all the steps, in all the situations of your child, and you have to make sure that you are at their side, his or her. But you have to also understand that once they are in a situation where they are being coached, they have another environment, there are other people involved, that you have to connect to these, and you have to work and support with the coaches. You have to be involved in a certain way, but you also have to be a bit, take a distance, because once they're in the training or game situation with their clubs or their coaches, you're just an observer. You're not coaching, and that's something which can be observed very often. But I think to support your child in becoming a good athlete, becoming a good professional, also as a good, personality-wise, and be a good, reflect whatever they bring back from the activities, would be a big contribution.
So what?
If I may say, and keep them safe from like in our game, from all these agents. What is it called? Vultures, or guys or people who want to have their feet in the game and you want to have their part in the game, because that's a bit protecting act, where the parents also can be very, very important.
It's a huge role. You spoke about supporting and kind of stepping away when they're in the daily training environment of the chosen sport, but also going in and acting as the protector of people who are outside the influence, who want their pound of flesh, so to speak. So it's such a tricky role and tricky space. The question I was going to ask was around, you mentioned about reflecting back. So can you speak maybe a little bit more around that, what you were trying to suggest?
Well, look, you'll be in the games. You'll be watching their competitions. Sometimes you'll be watching their sessions. You'll be observing their progress, their development. on the long run, not, not only for, short-term goals, winning games or being in a team or being benched, but you're observing their progression through the years. And that's why you have to make sure that you understand the key criteria which make progress. It's not, in a one-time situation whether he or she is scoring goals in a game or is being benched or in a starting lineup. It's a view of the whole development and all the aspects which you have already touched. I mean, how is the performance, evolving? But how is the player evolving as a person, as a personality, and how does he or she grow into a role of a future professional? And this is something where it's delicate because you don't want to get too much into what's actually the responsibility or the work of the coach, but you want to make it clear and make it understood that you know about the challenges, you know about the key steps and what is required, and you can actually be somehow like a mentor. I mean, that's what parents are anyway. You're a mentor in their development.
Yeah, brilliant. Hey, Fritz, I really appreciate the time so far towards the conversation. We like to wrap up with some quick fire questions. So firstly, set a question or pose a question for me and the audience for us to ponder over the next week.
How to, I mean, you're actually, podcast, your podcast is addressing, interested people in Oceania, right? How to really stay, connected to the rest of it, because that's what I experienced. How to really make sure that you're always, on top of the game, because it's very distant, football, European football, South American football, and that's what I experienced in my time with the All Whites. It's quite far. So how to use all the options, all the opportunities, all the possibilities to stay connected, create podcasts like yours, and to connect, to reach out to people who can share and give you insight in what's actually happening in the world, because it's anyway you can learn a lot, you can pick up a lot.
Absolutely. What about providing us with an idea or a concept that either you're thinking about at the minute or you've used recently that maybe we can apply in our lives, whatever that may be?
Build relationships. Being a coach, whether or being involved in coaching is all about relationships, and it's always first individuals, persons, the player, and then about coaching the game or whatever sports you're coaching. And to really to pick this up, you have to build a relationship, you have to build trust, and you have to make sure that you understand the individuality of your player or your athlete, because there is, any player is different, any athlete is different, and it's not that you come with your recept, with your ideas, with your philosophy. It's about finding the right answer to the question, what does he or she need in order to perform? And for that, you have to create relationships. You have to understand the person. You have to know your player or your athlete.
Yeah, excellent advice. Can you offer me up a book or a podcast, a TV series maybe that you would recommend for either athletes or parents or coaches to go and consume to help them on their journey?
Well, that's a difficult one because it could be a long list of books. What I've just recently had in a conversation with someone who stepped in an environment of professional coaching, where they were quite successful, but they wanted to make sure that they don't, get complacent on a certain level. I recommended a book which is called Hunger for Paradise. I don't know whether you're familiar with this.
I've read that. Yes. Yep. Yeah. It's a fantastic read.
And I like it because I mean, it gives examples from sports and from any organizations or from the business. It reminds you that you're never at the end. Even if you're on top, there's always more, and there's always new competitors coming up. And of course, that would be my advice in this moment. There's many more, but I think that's something which I would, anyway, recommend to players, to athletes, to coaches. Never stop, getting more information, reading and studying, role models as a player or an athlete. I tell you, go and see and study what the best your role models, how they do it, and try to pick something out what you can learn from it.
Yeah. So No Hunger in Paradise. I think Michael Calvin is the author, but yeah, very good read about
Asmussen is a Scandinavian. Asmussen is the name. Asmussen.
If you had a magic wand and you could wave it around and you could change one thing about your particular sport or processes within your sport, what would that be for the better?
I would read you VAR. No, that's just. I think there's always a lot of discussion about, especially if we talk about talent development. There's more and more influence from outside. We spoke about agents. We spoke about vultures, and of course, there's always more and more money involved, which you would like to keep away, at least on the level of talent development, because once you get to the top, it's about, it's a show business, and at the best should be paid like, movie stars or whatever. That's where the money is, that's where they can bring this in. But there is too much of this, evolving, and as a youth or as a coach of youth athletes, developing athletes, it's more and more complex, and you want to save them for a while from all these complex influences, which makes it more and more difficult, not only for the athlete, for the coaches, for the parents. You've mentioned it. It's very complex, and keep it the game, and don't lose the fun of it, because you take a lot out of it before you get into professional game, in the business. And that's why I'm saying on the basis, on the grassroots level, that's where it's the most rewarding, because that's still about the game and the fun, being involved in sports anyway.
Yeah, the joy. I like to refer of it as the joy is the cornerstone or the centerpiece of anything we do. And the moment you lose the joy, or the joy becomes secondary to the finances or the travel, I think that's when we get into a bit of trouble as well. So yeah, I wholeheartedly buy that. Give me one piece of advice that you were given at some point in your life that you would like to share with us, or that still rings true to you today.
Yeah, try to stick to your beliefs and your values. Like you opened the whole interview with a quote about this. You have to understand what you have to offer, what you are, your value, and stick to it. Don't bend because of certain, criteria or certain, in your environment. There's always pressure and you always have influence from outside. Be yourself and stick to your values. And, now talking, performance, you better lose with your convictions than losing, with adapting to other requirements just because certain, whether it's political or whatever, from influence from outside. Just be true to yourself.
Brilliant. Last one, leave us with a quote for the week.
I use that all the time with any team and with any organization where I'm working. Very simple. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can.
Brilliant. Hey, simple but elegant. Fritz, been a brilliant conversation. I've loved every minute of it. I've taken a lot of notes from this. I'm sure people listening have either thought about some things to go away and look at and research, or to apply in their own environment, but also been entertained along the way, hopefully, as well. So, hey, from one side of the world to the other, appreciate your time and thank you very much.
It was good seeing you. Thank you for having me, Gareth. Thank you.
Thanks so much for sticking through to the end of this episode. It would mean the world to us if you could hit the like or share button so we can get these amazing insights out to other like-minded coaches, athletes, and parents. Cheers.